Last night, the Prime Minister addressed the nation for what was the much-anticipated road out of lockdown plan.
But did it live up to the expectation, or have we been left with big questions unanswered? I think we've already answered that this morning. Well, hopefully staying alert are Janet and Matthew. They join us now. How alert are you both? Morning,
Good
Matthew.
morning.
Morning.
Hi.
If you at the end of the 10-minute pre-recorded interview, I looked at my wife and I said it was like watching a Monty Python sketch where you were drawing up the most confusing, beguiling nonsense to feed out. And then you think, no, this is advice from our Prime Minister at the time of our greatest crisis in UK history. I'm totally with you guys. Baffled, bamboozled, and actually very upset and angry. Nicola Sturgeon, what did she call it? His stuff is catastrophic, vague and imprecise, was her words on this change to stay alert.
I mean, she said it's their duty to deliver clarity. Janet, did we get clarity delivered last night?
Well, the most confusing thing of all was that strange graph that was like red on one side and then you had the mountain slope. And then in case you didn't know what a cafe looked like, you had a kind of, you had a bicycle, you had a cup of coffee. And I thought, I've said it before and I'm saying it again, it's patronising. All we want, and you said this just now, is a list of things we can and we can't do. Now, I listened to Len McCluskey on the radio this morning and he made the very good point that when the Prime Minister says, go back to work if you can, the people who can go back to work in manufacturing and construction working are some of the most lowest paid workers. So what happens if they're not able to work in safe conditions? Who do they ask? Who judges what is safe? And I found that all incredibly vaguely put out. And then I'm reading in one of the papers this morning, oh, well, if you go to work in an office, bosses have been told that no one can face each other. You've got to have plexiglass screens between each desk. But I come back to what you've been saying, the confusion, because he said go to work, but don't use public transport. So if you work in a large city like London or Birmingham or Manchester, and if you're my age, are you supposed to cycle to work because Boris likes bikes? Isn't that what it's all coming down to? That's why we've got a bike on the graph. I mean, cycling is okay for some people. And, you know, it's got a very strong lobby. But you can't expect the whole country to go to work on a bike or walk if they're not allowed on public transport. It's madness.
I mean, we're looking at Grant Shapps was saying last week he's going to build these new cycle lanes for everyone to cycle in. It's going to take months, years to get all this stuff involved. The unions are rightly going to be sitting there worrying about the health and safety of all their employees. That's going to be a massive block for stopping schools going back. I think the ambition to get primary schools back by the 1st of June, never going to happen. And the go to work, go by public transport if you have. I mean, it's a total mess.
Matthew, let's talk about this this going back to schools. This is reception and years one and year 6. And so let's take the younger there of that plan, 4 to 5-year-olds. How are they supposed to know how to be socially distant?
This is my Chester, and I'm telling you, there is no way he would be able to socially distance himself 2 metres from his best friend Arthur.
So how can
it's just not going to happen.
How can you
They'd forget, they
send that
know.
section back to school? Bearing in mind also that if the teachers are in PPE, they're in masks, there's talk of disinfecting the kids, then that's surely going to terrify the youngest members of our society.
I get it, but you can't get people back to work. I understand the logic here. You can't get people back to work unless you can get their kids cared for, which means opening schools. The problem that again, I thought we closed schools because children were viewed as super spreaders of the disease. As far as I can work out, after 7 weeks of lockdown, the only thing we've really achieved directly with COVID-19 is we've stopped the NHS being overrun. We don't have a vaccine, we don't have a cure, we don't have readily available tests, despite the Orwellian language of Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary. So with so many of those things going on, I keep thinking when you reopen schools, you create super spreaders, again, little pint-sized super spreaders, and all the problems we were warned about at the back end of February and March as we headed into this nightmare are still existent. Nothing has changed.
So, Janet, it's lots of points that didn't get answered that I think people were hoping for. I mean, the things about garden centres, things about public transport, things about masks, whether or not there was no guidance on whether or not we were meant to wear masks.
No, there wasn't any guidance about masks. And he also didn't mention old people or the elderly at all. In some ways, I'm glad he didn't mention my lot, so we're not a problem with a capital P, you know, as of now. But there was a lot that he didn't mention. And going back to schools very briefly, I do think we could follow other countries like Denmark and Sweden who have opened their primary schools and perhaps stagger the opening hours. I do agree with you that starting with the youngest children is challenging. I couldn't see why they couldn't have started with older years who would understand the instructions and might not find it so frightening. Matthew's made a very good point. You can't send kids back to school unless someone's going to pick them up, and if parents are supposed to go back to work. The whole it lacks. Not only does it lack detail, it lacks a kind of recognition of the real world that we're working in. And what Holly said at the beginning was very true. They've all stood in line like, you know, extras in Dad's army. We've all done our bit. We've waved our flags. We've clapped our hands. We've followed, you know, government orders. But the rot has now set in, because I read one survey today that said 50% of young people are already meeting their mates and can't see anything wrong with it. That's already happening. It's going to be very, very difficult to maintain lockdown.
Couple of 100 yards from my front door, 2 pubs were open over the weekend selling takeaway beer to people that then drank it on the street, paying no regard to social distancing rules at all. And they're talking about pubs may open in June. They're already opening.
So we're led to believe that there's a 50-page document being released later on this afternoon with more information on it. Do you think we'll expect a little more clarity in that?
So.
Well, I hope there's... Sorry, Matthew. I hope there's more clarity. But, you know, at the beginning you were saying, Phil, that Boris sounded like a kind of sat-nav. He's gone off the rails. In this booklet, I hope it's as clear and instructive as what you have to follow to get your driving licence. So if there is an analogy, we're going down the road and we've got to pass this test and pass that test, can they have the person that writes the instructions for driving? Because at the moment, I've got targets, I've got charts, and I've got to be alert at all times. I mean, this alert thing. What's alert, for goodness sake?
I mean, we had the other graph, the other thing that had red at the top, which was like red for danger, and then we had green at the bottom where there's nothing, right? So there's nothing's present in the. What does 4, 3, and 2 actually mean?
People were saying
there's nothing written on there.
Absolutely meaningless. Meaningless. It's like I had said the same thing about the terror alerts we have. We currently have a terror alert status in the UK. I have no idea what it is. I don't know what it was last week. I don't care what it is next week. I think Janet said something really, really salient there about the rot setting in. And I understand what the ambition is for Boris Johnson and for the country to get over COVID-19. But this stay alert depends on people being sensible, being responsible. And I think there's already plenty of evidence out there of people that aren't playing by the rules, that aren't being sensible, and you can't be alert to those kind of people. And they're the ones that frighten me.
All right, thank you both.
There's another thing, sorry.
No, go on, Janet, final point.
Finally, there was one thing that made me laugh. Now, apparently, you can play golf, tennis, and you can fish.
But not in Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland.
But not with both parents.
Yeah, not in Wales.
Oh, my gosh. I don't think I'm none the wiser there after that chat, however. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.